Well, I'm excited to hear your thoughts about Generations Deep. But before we do, why don't you tell us and our listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I am really excited to talk about Generation Steep. I am very, very invested and excited about this book. Let's see, I live in St. Louis, Missouri. I am a counseling intern right now, and I'm finishing up my master's in clinical mental health counseling. I have a master's in pastoral counseling as well.
Oh,
My husband and I are foster parents for teenagers, and we have a 3-year-old daughter, a 1-year-old daughter, and then a son on the way. And I've known Gina for maybe 5 years now, and
mm.
she is near and dear to my heart. So I am really just thrilled to be here to talk about her and her book.
Oh man, awesome. Wow. I'm glad you're here, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about the book. So just to get us kicked off, what key takeaways did you walk away with after reading Generations Deep?
Yeah, so it was interesting because I had a lot of takeaways from Generations Deep, but I had really profound takeaways about Gina.
Mm,
And the main thing, my main takeaway is I've always trusted Gina, but after reading the book, Gina is a voice who can be trusted.
mm,
We can listen to Gina's voice, we can lean into Gina's voice because she's gone through it. She places no blame. She makes no excuses for her own behavior, the behavior of others. She is truly a healed healer, and I was just blown away by how someone can go through what she's gone through, come out the other side, and share her story in a way that is healing and therapeutic to other people, to the extent that it makes us want to do our own healing and our own
mm.
work.
Wow. You're
Yeah.
so right. You're so right about that. It was very inspiring, um, to stop and think and digest and reflect and all of the things that you're talking about.
Yeah. And when I was reading it, there are certain parts I would like text her and I'd be like, I'm reading, like, how are you? How is that person this person? How
Mm,
did you get here?
mm,
Just through all the adversities she's been through. And um, what's cool in the book is it tells the reader how, if you were in a difficult spot, how to get to where she is. That you can be a therapeutic presence in the lives of those you love.
yeah, that's true. She what not only did she give you sort of the warnings leading into chapters and
Mm-hmm.
pieces of her story, but then she helped you know how to unpack what she's teaching you, instructing you through her own story at the end of each chapter. So
Yeah, yeah.
mm, that's true. So how has Generations Deep impacted your life since reading it?
Um, Now, okay, so she in Generations Deep, Gina has, with the work of other professionals, compiled the expanded trauma questionnaire.
Mm,
And I, as a counselor, I use the ACEs assessment with my clients, and that's the adverse childhood experiences. And those are like the big T traumas, like the abuse and the neglect and the all of the big T traumas. Gina spells out the little T traumas that maybe it's not like a 10 out of 10 on the trauma scale, but it's a 7 out of 10. It's a
mm,
5 out of 10. It changes the way we see ourselves. It
mhm.
changes the way we see the world. And thus, it is a trauma. It changes the way we interact in the world, these little T traumas. And she just does an amazing job at comprehensively spelling them all out for us. And so um, we can see like, oh, what I went through was impactful, and
Mm.
it kind of validates our own humanity. Like, I went through something, I
Mhm.
experienced something really, really difficult, and um, and that deserves attention.
Yeah.
That deserves um, that deserves nurturing. There's a broken part that deserves nurturing and protection. So now I mean, I see everything from a counseling perspective, all our disorders, all our maladaptive behaviors, it's all a trauma response.
Mm,
It's all a trauma response. And so we can see each other more gently,
mhm.
because we're seeing this is not someone who is mean or bad or dysfunctional. This is someone who's acting out of a trauma response because of their parents' trauma response and their caregiver's trauma response and their caregiver's trauma response. And so um, it softens us towards people. This book definitely will soften you towards people.
Wow. Yeah. So, do you have an example off the top of your head in your experience in line of work of what a little t trauma might be that a person
Yeah,
might not recognize in themselves?
yeah. I mean, I work a lot with teenage girls, and um, constant rejection,
Mm,
constant rejection, getting blocked on social media, getting blocked on someone's phone, just always finding out that you're getting blocked and then getting talked about, and then people talking about you on social media but not using your name. Those are all little t traumas. But I mean, so we think of a trauma as sexual abuse.
mhm,
Well, what if it wasn't sexual abuse, but it was unwanted sexual attention, which Gina touches on in her book?
mhm,
That's
mhm.
traumatic
Yeah.
because someone is seeing you in a way that is inappropriate and that you don't want. And it changes the way you see yourself. It changes the way you see other people. Other people become much less safe. And so that's a little t trauma that um, is is definitely worth um, excavating.
Yeah, you're so right. Even when it changes the way you trust others, then it changes your response and how you even enter a room or potentially stand in front of a group or
Mhm,
whether or not you would even go to an event or something
mhm,
like this. So
yeah.
yeah.
I also think something that we don't talk about that is traumatic is the this whole idea of you don't have it as bad as someone else, and so your experience, like,
Mm,
it's not as bad as a kid down the street, so
mhm,
suck it up. But
mhm.
that's dehumanizing and traumatic in itself. And Gina's book um, validates our stories and validates our experiences so that it says, yeah, it wasn't a 10 out of 10 trauma, but it was, it's not nothing. It's
Yeah.
not nothing what you've been through.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the humanity that you're touching on there and the dignity of each person in all of the pieces of
Mhm.
their story is so crucial, and I appreciate that you brought that up.
Yeah.
How did Generations Deep impact your understanding of the patterns of trauma?
Um, okay. So no one, no one just behaves traumatically or hurtfully in a vacuum. My husband and I say, like, the trauma I've experienced came over on the Mayflower. Like it's was just handed down and handed down and handed down
Mm,
and handed down. And it's not my fault what happened to me.
mhm,
It's not anyone's fault what happens to them. But if we have been hurt, it is our responsibility to heal it. And so we take the blame off of ourselves, but there is a responsibility on the back end to how am I not going to perpetuate this trauma?
mm,
Because the thing is, we're all traumatized in some way. We
mhm,
have all been through stuff. Um, and we either perpetuate it unknowingly or we heal it.
mm. Wow, that's really good. Um, in the book, she speaks about generational cycles.
Mhm.
Um, what what per, what resonated with you most in regard to generational cycles and as it pertains to breaking damage?
So I think that in the book, Gina, because of her experience and because of her expertise, she was able to say, if you've been through this, this is the type of therapy you need. And if you've been through this is the type of therapy you need. How is anybody going to know this stuff?
Mhm.
How would anyone ever know this stuff outside of the
Mhm.
counseling world? And
Yeah.
so Gina takes all the information basically we need and says, here you go. This is what you need. It's like exactly to take your first steps in like find a therapist who does CBT, find a therapist who does EMDR, find a therapist who does DBT, based on whatever it is you're going through, your symptoms are. How would we know that? How
Mhm.
would we know that without this book?
Yeah, wow, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
How could you utilize that then in your practice in terms of working and networking with other people?
Well, it's because I like when you see an issue come in, like this is like a self-harm, this is DBT, or the recurring thoughts that I just can't get rid of, like this is EMDR, or the negative self-worth, or all the, the way we think about ourselves. Oh, this is CBT. And so I have recommended this book to, I mean, the book's been out for like 6 minutes, I don't know, like maybe a week.
Yeah.
And I mean, already it's so invaluable. We can see that because it's #1 on Amazon, um, in the category. And um, just because there isn't, or I don't know of a book like this out there that is written in such a beautifully straightforward narrative way, that doesn't sugarcoat anything, that doesn't cover anything up, but that is still like, it's not re-traumatizing for whatever we've been through. Um, and it's just like truly a therapeutic aid for the everyday person. And I
Mhm.
can't tell you, like, as a counseling professional who's now been through like 2 counseling programs, I've never read a book like this.
Hmm.
And
Wow.
I've read some books that's
I
required for
bet.
my program, and I've
I bet.
read some books that aren't required for my program. And I have not seen a book like this that is so um, just so incredibly helpful and
Mhm.
written not for the clinician
Mhm.
necessarily, but for anyone who has grown up with other humans, which is who the book is for.
Awesome.
Anyone who grew up around humans.
Hmm. So in with that, and you mentioned already purchasing copies for clients. Does it come with any disclaimers when you're giving it to people?
Yes, you can't read the book and stay the same.
Mm. Mhm.
You can't. You can't read the book and stay the same. Um, and I'm, you know, someone who through like just my experiences, like I've done a lot of work, and I've um, sat on a lot of therapist couches, and even still, this book digs up stuff that you're like, oh, I guess I haven't really addressed that or haven't thought of that before.
Mm.
So the major disclaimer is there's a response. You will feel a responsibility.
Wow. Okay. That is a good segue into the next question, which pertains to how you believe Generations Deep will challenge its readers.
Yeah. I mean, you have to reckon with your own behaviors. You have to reckon with your own thought processes. You have to reckon with the way you see the world, and you will soften towards your caregivers.
Mm.
And I grew up in a great family. I grew up with great parents. And even then, it's still like, oh, the reason why this happened is because this and that. Like, you just kind of see um, your caregivers in a softer way. It leaves me anyway. I was more gracious to my parents, who we're all doing the best we can with what we've
Mhm.
been given. And
Mhm.
we're not excusing anyone. We're saying, oh, there's a reason behind it.
Mhm.
And now that I know that, like, maybe this isn't the optimal way of operating in the world, I can operate differently.
Yeah. How important would you say is the acknowledgement in dealing with your caregivers with compassion for someone's healing?
I would say it's the foundation, because we won't move towards forgiveness if we haven't moved towards compassion.
Mm.
And to move toward forgiveness it means that person, that thing that happened to me, no longer um they no longer owe me anything. I can move forward from this. This is something that happened, but it doesn't reflect my self-worth. It doesn't reflect who I am as a person created in the image of God. And so the compassion is essential for moving forward
Mm.
because we're no longer shackled to things that have happened in the past.
Okay. Wow. It's important. Um, so what would you say to someone who is fearful about entering into spaces, but thinking about doing the hard work of healing and addressing the dysfunction
Yeah.
and
I mean,
trauma?
I sit with people like new clients all the time. There's always like that the first session jitters, or when you pick up a book and you're like, oh, is this going to re-traumatize me? The thing that I always say to people is you don't need it. You don't need to read Generations Deep. You don't need to go to counseling. You don't need to heal from whatever happened. You deserve it. This
Mm.
is something that as a human, you deserve to have your experiences validated. You deserve to have healthy relationships. You deserve to take an honest look at your own life. And we deserve to then turn around to the people who we may have hurt and said, I'm sorry,
Mm.
which the book might actually require you or kind of urging you to do.
Mm-hmm. Compel you, if nothing else. Yeah.
Yes, compel you.
Um, so I hear a lot of hope in that answer. And so when Gina explained that it's never too late to be a cycle breaker,
Mhm.
what message of hope do you hear from that truth?
Well, I think because the book softens us toward people, and whether we reconcile with them or not, we might stop at forgiveness, whether we reconcile with them or not. It moves us toward healthy relationships, and we are hurt in relationship, and we are healed in relationship. And it moves us toward more healing relationships. It moves us toward being healers in relationships. It moves us toward ways, how do we respond in relationship instead of react in relationship. um, and so there is so much hope because we operate differently when we have an awareness of why we are the way we are.
Mm.
And awareness is like, I mean, 90% of the way there. Once we become aware, we just end up operating differently in our relationships.
Mm. It's really helpful. Um, so in light of what you'd said earlier about, being human and how we're all human,
Mhm.
who would you recommend read Generations Deep and why?
Anyone who's grown up with other humans. Um, if you weren't raised by wolves, or even if you were. No, I think that this book is it's accessible for anyone, and there is something that anyone can get out of it because um, no one's parents were perfect, no one's caregivers were perfect, no one's friends were perfect, and so there is something in this book for everyone because we are humans who have interacted all our lives with other humans.
Mm. Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your words of wisdom. And thank you for sharing your heart with us about Generations Deep.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. Thank you.